the windows available for which produce. What do I mean by this? I mean, do you want to export bananas, for example? Do you want to export pepper, your green pepper? Do you want to export your peas? What we have done after engaging Namibia, they shared with us their annual import bill broken down by month. And basically, they've then indicated which months they import the most, or they are not able to produce or to supply the local market sufficiently based on their local producers. So this presents a window for Zimbabwean producers, as long as you can supply or produce in those specific months, then you're almost always guaranteed a market. So we are working on the same with other countries, like I said, in the region, and also usually engage buyers from different countries to try and understand, like I said, these windows, what is available at what point in time. I can also inform our farmers that Angola is another country of interest, which has a lot of demand for various products. You're looking at pork products, processed foods, your tinned products, vegetables, beans, your dairy products, poultry and eggs, fresh juice concentrates, and even the fresh produce itself. And just a point of information, do you realize that Angola imports most of its be it fresh produce or products all the way from Portugal? When Zimbabwe, well, we could say literally we're next door, and these are opportunities that we're missing and losing markets to countries that are further away from us. We look at issues like your citrus. There's a significantly growing demand in China of citrus products. This is your oranges, your lemons, your lime. Then you look at your avocados. There's a growing demand for avocados in Europe. This is because it's also considered. And what is a superfood? A superfood, these are mostly plant-based, but also some fish and dairy products. And there's a growing health trend in Europe. So these are products that are nutritionally dense and good for one's health. Sorry, I think we're receiving a bit of feedback from one of our farmers. I don't know if everyone else can hear me well enough.
I can hear you well.
We can hear you.
Okay, so I'll continue. So as I was saying, avocados, there's a growing demand. There's also a growing demand for macadamia nuts. And then we also have blueberries, also considered a superfood, and there's demand in Europe. And then, interestingly enough, we've got peas. Zimbabwe imports a lot of peas, and we're actually the second largest supplier into the UK and Netherlands of peas as Zimbabwe. So yes, we are. As I mentioned, if you do it well, it can be quite sustainable. And then when you look at flowers as well, I think for the most part, this discussion has been dominating with fresh produce or fresh fruit and vegetables. Also growing demand for flowers in Europe and Asia, and certain open field varieties that actually do very well in Zimbabwe. So again, that presents opportunities for targets some of these markets. And allow me to take this time to mention a particular sweet potato variety that is growing again in demand in Europe. I think most of us would be aware or familiar with the orange fresh variety of sweet potato. There's a growing demand for that that variety of sweet potatoes in Europe, and if you do it right, you're almost always guaranteed the market. And we did some research sometime last year. We did some research sometime last year to also try and understand, the windows, as I mentioned earlier, which windows of opportunity are available if you want to grow these varieties for the export market for Europe. And basically, between April and July, August, you're almost always guaranteed of a market because most of the other major suppliers into Europe would have run out or would not supply.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. I hope our farmers are taking notes on that. So, back to Mr. Charles, I would like to know if you know any off-takers here in Zimbabwe, local off-takers, if you have any links or so that our farmers maybe they can just check.
Well, for fresh farm produce, yes, we have the local supermarkets that wholesalers such as Sandman, Brands Fresh, Food Lovers, those ones are takers of fresh produce, such as onions, cabbages, even fruits, they take. And we also have our supermarkets, TM, OK, and Choppies, they do take. And the good thing about that is, as bankers, when you supply to these sort of large supermarkets, we can, instead of you waiting for, say, 30 days to get your money, sometimes they give such long periods. You can then bring the invoices to the bank and we can sort of discount them. That is, if you are in need of cash, if your cash flows are demanding that you need the money immediately, we can sort of discount those ones. So we also do invoice discount when you come with those invoices where you would have supplied those reputable organizations or big corporates. But it becomes a bit of a challenge when you supply the lucrative sort of Mariam Sika market, because I see lots of vegetables going there. I think over 50% of vegetables in Harare are available from the market in Bari. But all the same, that is still a lucrative market which one can exploit, depending on how you see it. Because that other side, it becomes a bit of a challenge, especially when it comes to banks. For you to prove to us that you are in the business, you won't be having those invoices compared to when you deal with your formal markets. So generally, those are the markets we have, and those are some of the advantages and disadvantages when we come to maybe to consider the relationship beyond the transactional business. When you want credit on the other side, then say, can we see, unless if you are banking your receipts after listing the formal markets.
Okay, thank you. Right now, I think we are going to move to question and answer session. So the audience now, the time, any issue, any question to ask our panelists, you can go ahead and ask.
Thank you for that. Unless if I can come in as our attendees prepare to ask their question. If you've got a question, please just raise your hand and then we'll unmute you or also activate your video so that you can ask your question directly to the panelists. Once the questions are about to come through, I will read the first question that came through. Kupakwashi, I think when we began the discussion, you spoke about what farmers have to do when they're looking at exporting their produce. But there were also some health certificates and something else that you spoke about. Some of our attendees missed that part. If you can probably just rehash that, I think that's underneath.
Okay, I think for the benefit of those who missed that part, in terms of the requirements, I said the first requirement is for you to have an agro dealer or an agro producer certificate. The difference obviously being whether you're a dealer and you're not whether you're a dealer or an actual producer. And this is obtained from the Agricultural Marketing Authority. And I should say that this is an annual certificate. So if you pay for it now, it's valid for the year. It's a once-off certificate. And the annual registration fee for an individual agro dealer, 2,500 Zimbabwean dollars, and for an agro producers, it's 20 Zimbabwean dollars. Then the second requirement is, sorry, I think I'm getting some feedback from Nesbit, but I hope everyone else can hear me. So the second requirement is a phytosanitary certificate. I'll type the actual spelling of that, but it's basically a health certificate obtained from the Plant Quarantine and Research Institute. That's PQRI. And then the cost of that certificate is 25 Zimbabwean dollars, and it's obtained from either their Mazoe plant protection offices in Mazoe, or they've got an office at the airport.
Thank you for that.
Depending on the location. And then the third one is an Sorry, Blessmo?
No, that's fine. You can go ahead first.
Okay. And the third one is an export permit issued by the Ministry of Agriculture. And this is issued for a specific quantity and time period. So you have to be specific in terms of what you are applying for, and what produce it is, what quantities, and for what time period you're applying it for, because it can expire. And an FYI, this export permit is also then required by the plant health inspectors at points of exit. These are the export points as well as ZIMRA. And also, you can't go and apply for an export permit before you have an Agricultural Marketing Authority certificate. So you need to take note of that.
Thank you so much, Cooper. Let me request Emma to unmute Nosipo so that she can ask a question. Emma, please go ahead and unmute Nosipo. Nosipo, I can see you raise your hand. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I do apologize. I was just going to ask Cooper. I've been looking at a lot of certification, and I just wanted to know which one's the best. I mean, you did mention that Global Gap was probably the standard or the one that everyone wants. Because what I'm finding is that some people are saying FSC, and then some people want the BRC from the British Consortium. So I'm just wondering, will the Global Gap cover everything? So if I was to export, let's say, to the Netherlands, if I just had the British one, would that enable me to cross over into the Netherlands or into Turkey or whatever nation I wanted to go to?
Okay, thanks for that. I think first of all, let me re-highlight the fact that as you said, and as I said earlier, Global Gap, it's not a mandatory requirement, but what happens is, depending on the buyer that you're dealing with. So most of the buyers that we've since engaged, we've found that when it comes to the European markets, the basic requirement, it's a voluntary standard, but if you walk into the office and you're offering a produce to a buyer in Europe and you don't have a Global Gap certificate, that's the first thing they'll ask for. So I think it then becomes a question of if you have the other certificates and they are valid or relevant to Europe, then and you basically present that this is the certificate that I have and this is the produce that I want to bring to you. If they are happy with it, then obviously they will then take it. But then what we've also noticed is because of Global Gap, how they've positioned themselves, they've tried to make sure that it's, for the most part, easily accessible in different areas of the world. So, and I think I noticed one question, if I may tackle it this more in the group chat, that someone was asking if you can actually get that certification in Zimbabwe. unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have any certification bodies for global gap. But what local farmers are doing, they are then engaged. There is a certification body in South Africa, and maybe just another advantage that we have is we have we have what are called farm assurers. Farm assurers, these are the guys who come and assist you as you prepare for your audit with the certification body. So we have two, from the official website, we have two people who have indicated that they work with Zimbabwe, but one of which is actually based in Zimbabwe. I think as farmers, if you're in other farmers groups, you might have heard of Clarence Mwale. He's one of, he's probably the only main certified farm assurer in Zimbabwe. But I'm not saying that there are no other internal auditors. There are other, be they agronomists or people who can then assist you as you prepare for your audit. But as I mentioned, what Global Gap has tried to do is make sure that it's more easily accessible to most people, most farmers in different countries across the globe. So that's why it's for the most part, the easier option to go to. You also have other certifications. For example, you could then choose to go for organic certification. Again, depending on who your buyer is, then if you really present that you're organically certified, they may accept that. But the important aspect, it's a voluntary standard, but because buyers, almost every single buyer in Europe is asking for that, it is indirectly turned into a somewhat mandatory requirement. I hope that covers your question, Yvonne.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kupa. May the person who is using a Galaxy S10 phone please go ahead and ask their question.
Thank you, Chair. Just directing my question to Mr. Midzi, you did mention about the import certification. Obviously, as a farmer who will be based in Zimbabwe, how do you support us to apply for those import certification from the other end of the Africa intra-market? That's my question number one. And the other thing, myself, I am in the UK, and I am a potential buyer to some of our clients, but some of our farmers on the platform. But what we are finding is that you have mentioned about different certifications that are to be presented to us. You did miss on the product specification. Who helps our farmers in Zimbabwe to get product specification? Say I were to approach a farmer to say I need their dried bananas. Who provides product certification for them? And as a question which was asked earlier by a lady who came off, the answer to that, at times, it's markets are quite different. You know, there are different changes. For instance, with the UK, we came out of Brexit, and obviously the regulations are changing. You would see even the way of labeling that is required for products is changing from how Europe will run. So it is also paramount for the farmer to check with their market the requirements of certifications that are required. So you may have the gap, but they will also say we need specific from specific centers that are coming to test your products. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution, and we are excited at this to have a buyer on the platform today, because as we said, we are producing a lot of things, a lot of great horticulture products in Zim, but at times the difficulty is how do we break into the market? How do we find these markets? We're happy that when you are able to join us. We'll be also happy if you can share your contacts with us at Bank ABC, so that we can also, if you allow us, link you to farmers that are in Zimbabwe, so that we together, we grow together. As we collaborate, we actually grow. Let's move on to the next question. Anisufredi, you please go ahead and ask your question?
Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity. My question is directed to Zimtrade. So because of the current monetary policy, are farmers able to access their money still as forex in the banks? Because I know sometimes the banks talk about liquidating your money to local currency. So are they able to access their money in the banks? Do you know anything like that? And also, because of the current COVID situation, how has this affected demand in our traditional export destinations? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Fred. Before I put Kupa on the spot, I think in terms of now allowing to answer the second part of your question, the first part of the bank, what you plan.
All right, thanks, Bismo. I was actually going to suggest the same, that the Bank ABC is in that position to answer you, Anesu, in terms of the first part of your question and whether or not you're able to access your funds. If I may go back to, unfortunately, I didn't get your name, the lady using the Galaxy S10. So the first part of your question was regarding the import permits. So what normally then happens is, depending on the buyer, so if you strike an agreement with the buyer in the respective country, they would then handle that part of that requirement, because obviously if they want your produce and they are happy with it, they have to then comply with the requirements on their side of the country. But then what we also notice, depending on who your buyer is or how you want to approach the market, and I think to some extent this then works to our advantage as Zimbabweans, that there are many Zimbabweans across the globe where be it your relatives or even friends, depending on the country, you could easily find a colleague or a friend who can assist you on that end. So some people then go that route and find relatives or friends in the respective country. I'm a farmer here, and then I ask you if you can assist with that process. Obviously then becomes a question of your agreement, who's going to cover the costs of those requirements. But then if you want the produce, it means you also have identified the market in that country that you believe that you can then push the product. So it then becomes a question of how you then approach it as a buyer and seller. And then I'm not sure, maybe I'll ask you now, you said you're asking who helps our farmers get, is it product specification or product certification? I didn't get that.
Product specification. Normally it's one of the requirements, especially on our labeling. Yeah, thank you. And my name is Primrose.
Primrose. Okay, perfect. So we have the Standards Association. Those are, I would say, they're the basic go-to. Then want to get that product specification. And thank you for bringing that up. It's rightfully, when it comes to labeling, depending on the produce or the products that you want to send. The moment, I think there was also another question in terms of the requirements for processed foods. So the requirements then differ when you're dealing with processed foods. And that's where your packaging requirements, your labeling requirements also now come into play. Whereas if you're exporting in bulk, for the most part, yes, you also have those requirements, but they're applying to your whole shipload of fresh produce. But if you're now dealing, like you said, dried bananas, you want to understand what carbohydrates, what sugars are there. Standards Association is there in Zimbabwe, and they can assist you on that front. And thank you for bringing the labeling requirements. For example, I'll let you, I think you rightfully said you need to also then understand the respective market that you're dealing with. I can tell you right now that Mozambique, if you're dealing with processed foods, you can't export processed or packaged products which are not labeled in Portuguese. It's a requirement. So you could have the best product in Zimbabwe because we're an English-speaking country, but then if you don't change your packaging labeling to Portuguese, you won't be able to access that market. Then I think think in terms of the last part before Blessmore comes in was the COVID. So from where we are sitting as Zimtrade, I think in Zimbabwe, we started getting or feeling a lot of the pressure sometime around March, and I think that's to say that then obviously coincided with when we started the lockdowns. So because of the restrictions in movement and all that in Zimbabwe, that also affected some farmers' ability to access inputs, to access chemicals, and like you ask in terms of markets. But what we have seen, especially for farmers that already had established markets and established buyers, it's now just one of their major problems was also the issue of flights. I'm talking more specifically in terms of exports of horticulture to Europe, where airlines had also been grounded. But ever since KLM and I can give example KLM and Ethiopian Airlines came back on board, we've seen a change where produce has started moving. So yes, obviously the challenges will come more, not necessarily in demand. I mean, obviously yes, economies that have been hit by COVID, and obviously that translates to reduced demand. But for the most part, the challenges have been coming more from the ability to then move. Even if you're looking at the region, moving your truck, you get to the border. I think some of you may be aware of the recent, I think yesterday there was a notice that came from SINRA, which required basically everyone who visits a point of entry or exit to have tested for COVID. But I think that has since been softened up. But those requirements and how countries are then treating or trying to come up with measures to safeguard themselves is the most part that is affecting most farmers.
Thank you for that, Kupa. Let me ask Oliver to attend to the question that was in terms of access to funds in the bank. Oish, please, if you can guide.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we can confirm. If you have an account with us and your money has come through exports, you can access your funds either cash. If you want to transfer to other countries for maybe imports, we can still do that. So the answer to the question is yes.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm going to ask Perekwa to also ask a question. May I please have that process to be brief in terms of the question, direct, so that the panelists can get to the crux of the matter.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask if there's a market for garlic, sugar beans, and ginger from the European world. Thank you.
Upa, would you like to take that?
Okay, thanks Blessmore. And so market for garlic, sugar beans, and ginger. That's not an easy one. Why I say that is because when you're looking at European markets, not so much. So when we're looking, wherever we get inquiries for these kinds of products like your garlic and ginger, we normally recommend for the region. Yes, you can find your market in the region, but as I mentioned earlier, that it then becomes a question of you being in a position to identify the gaps where the respective country that you're targeting is not able to sufficiently produce that produce. That is your garlic and ginger. Sugar beans, specifically, I'll unfortunately share not so pleasant news, because for the most part as Zimbabwe, we're not even self-sufficient for sugar beans. So what then happens is, as I mentioned, one of the requirements is for you to get a permit from the Ministry of Agriculture. And so one of the reasons that requirement is there is to also manage to make sure that we don't wake up with no sugar beans in Zimbabwe, and we end up importing all the sugar beans from our neighboring countries. So it's also sort of like a restriction measure so they would know basically anticipated tonnage of sugar beets for this month or for this year. And if we have a deficit, you are highly unlikely to get that permit. But then for the other products, ginger and garlic, I would also recommend that you value add, create a sauce, create a mixed kind of mixed ginger or crushed garlic, crushed garlic, crushed ginger. I don't know if especially for those in Zimbabwe, I would say this because it's one of the products that I normally consume personally. Crushed garlic, it's either for the most part very expensive or not easy to find, and you have moments where you can't even find it in the shops. So by the very same argument, if you can do a bit of value addition, crush it, add some oil or white wine vinegar, or find a unique way to transform it, then you can easily find a better market for it in the region. I can tell you, for example, you can talk of chilies as an example. Export of chilies, the number of inquiries we get on export of chilies are mass. But then what other guys have since decided to do, they've created, as I mentioned, crushed chilies, and there's a demand for that in Botswana. Crushed beet in the form of a spice, or you add oil, vegetable oil, or add white wine vinegar, and now you already have a market. And it's a simple thing, but you transform a product and you turned it into a niche market product.
Thank you for that, Koba. I know for many farmers, they're always complaining, I try to sell my cabbages and I get a low price. As long as you sell your product, it's like almost like raw form, you don't get much value out of it. I'm so glad that you spoke about value addition. That is where we need to go as farmers. That is where all the dollars are. Half the time I'm complaining, the middlemen are making a lot of money. Why? Because they're adding value to what you sweat. So definitely, many thanks for that. We are running out of time, but we'll allow a few more questions. Please do be brief. Mr. Kufa, can you please go ahead?
I would like to add on what Mr. Kufa said.
That's fine, Anis, you can go ahead.
Okay. In terms of crops like garlic, I think our farmers have to look at the regional market, because last year we had a buyer in Mozambique who wanted garlic, but the problem now is our farmers, are they able to constantly supply the market? Because the thing is on constant. Our buyers, they don't want a situation whereby you supply them today, but next week you have nothing to supply. So our advice is, if our farmers want to get into that export market of crops like garlic, they have to stagger their crops into stages. Let's say, for example, this week they plant this crop, then after 2 weeks they plant another one, so that they can be able to constantly supply the market. That's what I want to do.
Thank you, Anis. We will take one question from